Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And we welcome you back to Talk of the Town for this Thursday, February 25th. I'm Gary Stevens. Once a month, we catch up on what is going on in the two county clerk's offices in our area. When we chat with Bob Janetsky of Allegan County, we call the segment Clerk's Corner because of his love for hockey, and we use the theme for Don Cherry's Coach's Corner. No such theatrics for Justin Roebuck. He is the Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds. He joins us via the Zoom connection. Justin, good morning. We will try to keep calm and carry on, but I don't think I'm going to play Doctor Who for you and all that.
Well, I got to come up with some sort of catchy phrase now for my segment, Gary. I'll work on that.
Yeah, we'll pick on something. We'll pick something out. But if you have a question for Justin, you can join us at 395-1450, 395-1450. I will begin our discussion with you, Justin, with a topic I sort of ended with Clerk Janetsky a couple of days ago. And it's talking about CPL license. And he noted in Allegan County that there was a big increase in 2020 for applications of CPL license in his county. What about Ottawa County? Because it looks like, and Bob said it best, when we have an election, we get more people wanting to get those CPL license, and last year was no exception.
Yeah, absolutely right on that. We are looking at just checking a couple of numbers to see what our actual numbers were. But last year, in 2020, we processed a little over 4,900 CPLs, and that's up almost 1,000 from sort of our normal annual CPL. And that included a couple of weeks there during the pandemic where we were completely shut down to in-person traffic entirely. So I would agree on that front with Bob that it's a very cyclical process, and quite often what we see in an election year, in a presidential election year, really no matter who's on the ballot, those CPL numbers tend to increase a bit. So that's a pretty dramatic increase. But yeah, 4,900 CPLs last year in Ottawa County.
And the reason why I'm bringing this up is the fact, and for those who might have missed our conversation with Clerk Janetsky, I will direct you to our webpage at WHTC.com under Talk of the Town. Audio is available there, plus a link to the video we had with Bob. But one of the things that he explained, and you can explain as well, because sometimes we have a different audience, is the fact that the clerk's office handles the initial, it's the point of entry for those wishing to get the license. Your office does not do any of the investigation. Basically, people want a license, they come to you, and then everything gets punted over to the state police.
Yeah, that is correct. And that process has changed from the beginning of the concealed pistol license process, which really kind of originated out of legislation right around the year 2000, I believe. It used to be that the county every county had to establish what they called a gun board that included a representative from the prosecutor's office, as well as the sheriff's department and Michigan State Police, and that gun board would actually vote. They would take a vote with every single applicant as to whether or not they were qualified for a concealed pistol license. And that whole process changed probably about 4 years ago or so, a little bit more than that, 5 years ago now, where exactly as you said, basically what happens, it's a pretty rote process, a pretty simple process in our office. We are the intake, if you will, for that. We take the application, fingerprints are processed, and of course our office will be processing fingerprints very shortly. It used to be we had to go through the sheriff's office to do those, but fingerprints happen, and then MSP, Michigan State Police, kind of takes that over and does a background check. And if the background check clears, then the applicant is approved. So it's a much more simplified process. Saved a lot of time for our CPL customers in that process as well.
Now, one other thing too is the fact that people can start the process online, but then they have to go in person. Does this have to be done at the county seat in Grand Haven or at the Fillmore complex? Both, or where exactly?
Sure. Yeah, it's actually at our Fillmore office, and due to COVID and the county's restrictions still on in-person application or in-person services, I should say, we've kind of centralized all of our services at the Fillmore complex, which is really the most central, I suppose, area in the county. Um, but yeah, the law still requires an actual in-person oath to be administered for the CPL. So customers can come in there, take that in-person oath, sign the application officially. And of course, the fingerprinting process is naturally an in-person process as well. And then we can get customers taken care of. So we are doing appointments for those CPLs, but again, plenty of available appointments in our office, and kind of makes things a little bit more streamlined, even for customers. You know exactly when you have to go and what you have to do.
One final question about the CPL situation and fingerprints. You mentioned the fact that your office will be able to start doing this soon. You have a timetable as to when that, or target date for when that could possibly be the case where people can get fingerprinted through your office, not to have to go to see Sheriff Steve Kempker and the men and women in brown.
Yeah, we're looking at probably about the second week of March for that officially rolling out for our CPL applicants. And this has really been a huge help, because obviously the sheriff's office is required to process fingerprinting for a number of different aspects of that touch their department. So CPL fingerprinting is really only a small part of the overall fingerprinting for the sheriff's office. But due to some of the restrictions of COVID and closures and appointment only process, the fingerprinting there has been a little bit backlogged. And we just feel like both the sheriff and I feel like it makes a lot of sense to have a one-stop shop where we don't have to set up two appointments, one for fingerprinting, one for the actual application. And I think this will just streamline things for customers, make it a lot more simple. So we're looking forward to rolling that out probably second week of March.
395-1450, 395-1450. If you have a question for Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Justin Roebuck, he'll be happy to take it at 395-1450. You touched upon this in terms of people needing to be in person to get the CPL licenses at the county clerk's office in the Fillmore Street Administrative Complex. Getting appointments and the process for doing that. What services are mandatory where you have to show up and make an appointment, or to make an appointment then show up? And what services can people still do remotely or via the internet?
Yeah, it's a great question. So really, what is nice about our processes and the number of things we brought online and the ability we have to do things through the mail, there's really only three things that are absolutely required to be in person when it comes to services in our office. And those are personal protection order, which is done at the court in Grand Haven. It's technically a court filing, and that has to be an in-person filing there. And then the other two items are a notary public application. So if you're going to become a notary public, you still have to take an official oath. That has to be done in person, present with someone from the clerk's office. And then the other one is CPLs. So really, those are the only three services required to be in person. If you want to get a marriage license, if you want to get a copy of a vital record, if you want to record a land transaction with our office, all of those things are definitely doable by appointment if you'd like an appointment. But the nice thing about that is we're able to handle so many of those online and through the mail. So that's been a great process for our team during this difficult COVID period.
Tough question for you to answer. I'm not going to ask you as to why, but are we seeing more people filing PPOs through your office?
Yeah, that's a good question. It has been a little cyclical. So yes, for a while, during especially as we were kind of coming out of that first lockdown, really about a year, beginning about a year ago, obviously, as we were coming through that April, May, and June period, we were seeing actually an increase of PPOs, but that's kind of leveled off, and we're about at the normal level, I would say, for PPOs in general to be filed. We take about 700 or 800 of those a year, give or take. And so personal protection orders are roughly the same as they have been over the past couple of years.
395-1450, 395-1450. If you have a question for Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Justin Roebuck, he'll be happy to answer it at 395-1450. Let me back up for a moment, and I don't know whether or not you can answer this because it's a legal question, I think, more than anything else. When somebody wants to apply for a concealed pistol license, what type of weapons are involved with the pistol aspect of it? What type of weapons would this license enable somebody to have? And maybe more importantly, what type of weapons are not covered by a CPL? If you can answer it, fine. If not, we can understand.
It's a good question. I think, in general, the CPL, the specific legislation that covers CPL in the statute doesn't actually designate what type of weapon to be concealed. So that's kind of an interesting process to think through. I'm not sure if I could conceal, my 12 gauge on my person but technically, I guess the CPL would qualify for that. So really, what you'd have to adhere to are the other rules and requirements with regard to firearm purchasing and the firearms that we are legally allowed to carry with us. But there's nothing specifically in the CPL statute that actually governs what type of firearm you can or cannot conceal. That's a good question.
Yeah, because some firearms, sawed-off shotguns, no, you can't play with them. Or having
silencers, I think there's quite a few restrictions on those.
Yeah, you can't play with the silencers. You don't want to be James Bond, or even John Steed. No, he used a Brawley. But anyway, the Brawley and like. But the thing is, knives. Well, that doesn't. I don't think that's involved with the CPL because it's a knife.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's only for actual firearms, so that's definitely not covered there. I think anyone can currently conceal a knife, but I'm not a legal expert. But.
Yeah. And then of course it's kind of hard to be a Robin Hood and conceal the bow and arrow if you want to do that. We're having some little fun here, but it is a serious thing, and the right to bear arms continues to be a controversial subject, the Second Amendment, and that's a discussion for a different forum at a different time. 395-1450, 395-1450. I always want to bring this up when we talk to you about Register of Deeds, and Bob's mentioned it and you've mentioned it as well. Ways to protect people from having their deed be, shall we say, taken out literally from under them. Are we seeing more awareness of that situation? Since, well, I don't know. I don't want to say we're the ones that are making people more aware, but your office and Bob's office has brought it up a little bit more.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a great point, Gary, because we have seen an actual increase in the number of folks that have signed up for our service that actually provides notice whenever a document is recorded in your name or with your property, with your parcel identification number as well. So we're up several hundred of those over the past couple of years, which is really encouraging to me because it's a really simple thing. I mean, when you think about it, property fraud, unfortunately, is simple to commit. Now, it's not necessarily easy for someone to come and, physically take the house that you're living in or your property, but it's relatively simple under the way that our statutes are set up for someone to record a transaction in your name or with your property that could basically mess up your chain of title, or what we call the kind of the historical chain of custody of property. And that could have impacts on your credit, can certainly have impacts, if you go to refinance your house or take out a second mortgage, sell the house, and so forth. So really important aspect of just kind of guarding, sort of like guarding your credit, and getting a credit report every year. We really encourage folks to kind of check up on their deeds as well. You can search online for free at miottawa.org/ROD, and you can look up your property and the documents associated with that at any time, just simply by typing in your last name or your street address. But this free service that we have basically just alerts you by text, email, or even a phone call from our office if someone ever records anything in your name. And it's a really great thing to be able to be aware of so that you can take care of that as quickly as possible.
395-1450. Good morning. You're on the line with County Clerk Justin Roebuck.
Hey, just to circle back to the pistol issue, a pistol here in Michigan is defined as a loaded or unloaded firearm that is 26 inches or less in length. And suppressors are sometimes called silencers. They are legal in Michigan, and you can own those. You got to pay a little bit to get the doggone thing registered with the federal government, but in 2016, Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette changed or pushed through that requirement to allow citizens to have those suppressors so that it was in line with federal law, which changed to allow regular citizens to have access to those. So sorry about circling back.
That's all right. That's all right. Appreciate it. Just to clarify that, and thank you very much for the call.
Definitely helpful info. And obviously that gentleman knows a little bit more about the statutes regarding firearms than myself. So we'd have to go back and kind of look at the definitions of the CPL statute specifically. But my guess is that pistol definition is also in the CPL statute. And if the pistol is defined in the statute as 26 inches or less.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it
sure.
does. It does. 395-1450, 395-1450. Now I know people will now start getting their spy kits. They can be a secret agent themselves. What is it? The old song Double O Soul. I mean, that was an old one from the 1960s. Well, Justin, I sort of held up on this until now because we had been certainly much dominating our conversations over the last few months about the elections, but I wanted to get some other things before we get to the elections discussion. And
Sure.
The audit, the post-election audit of what happened on November 3, I think we can we start putting this to bed right now, or is it still going to be, a continual open book?
Well, it's a great question, Gary. I think the 2020 election was my third presidential election in Ottawa County in terms of my election administration experience. And it was definitely the longest election that I've ever experienced as well. I'm sure probably most Americans feel that way, just in terms of the wind down to, decomposing or deconstructing, I guess, what happened and how it happened and ways we can improve. And so, one of the things that we talked about as a team in our office early on was, let's issue a really full-bodied report after this is over, giving ourselves the time to really kind of look through the process, the post-election audit process, which is a really important piece of transparency. And I think. And we've done that, and we're about ready to release this report. We'll definitely be sharing that with you folks as well. But really just kind of wanted to focus on the successes of the election because there were many, and also the ways that we can improve and some of the things that we could have done better. And I think a big part of maintaining trust in our community is owning mistakes made or owning things that went wrong, and making sure that we can improve on that. So there's kind of a track record of, here's where we can improve and here's what we have done to improve. So that's going to be a part of the report as well. And I'm kind of excited to talk a little bit more about that in the coming weeks and release that. And again, hopefully for all of our sakes, sort of put the 2020 election to rest. But I do think that the transparency of the audit report is really important. Post-election audits, I think I've shared with you before, are not actually legally supposed to be open to the public. I shouldn't say supposed to be. They're not required to be open to the public. And we, coming out of 2020, really thought that through and said, no, I think we want to open this to the public. I think we want to make this a very public, very transparent process. And so we've done that, and the report's just kind of the extension of that, making sure that people, because previously, quite honestly, we'd do these audits and we'd file away the information, and we used them as a training tool. If things were found, we definitely address those things with our election workers, with our clerks. But we haven't released that to the public. And so I think this is kind of turning a tide and realizing that we need to go more transparent than ever before. And it's a really important part of the election process.
395-1450. Good morning. You're on the line with Clerk Justin Roebuck.
Yeah, hi. Just last week, Steve Redmond, I believe from the Ottawa County Patriots, was on and was highlighting the important information that was going to be at their meeting, especially referencing Mike Liddell and the MyPillow guy with his big report about election fraud. So based on your information and expertise, we don't really need to worry about that. Am I correct?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, and I know I've been on the program a little bit talking about some of those theories, I guess we could call them, around some of the election concerns that folks had, particularly with Dominion voting equipment. That's been a highlight of Mike Lindell's current platform. Apparently, he's been doing other things on the side of selling pillows. He's also been dabbling in elections processes. But I will tell you, we have really thoroughly looked into some of this stuff from our perspective and from our team's perspective. And there is a lot of misinformation. And I even hesitate to call it misinformation because a lot of it is outright lies. And I think it's really important that we call lies lies. We address the fact that we need improvement in our election process, and we need to talk through what those improvements are. But Ottawa County in particular, we had false affidavits filed in federal court alleging things from the same groups that Lindell is citing, and they were lies. So I'm very hesitant to embrace some of the stuff that's been out there in terms of those allegations, particularly by Lindell and by some of the other, staunch advocates of essentially saying that votes were switched and equipment is malfunctioning to change votes and change that process. But I think that's a really good question. I do appreciate it. I think we need to address what's wrong with our system. Of course it's flawed. Of course we need to make it better. It's a human process. We need to punish people who commit fraud. But we also really do need to dig into the facts. And I appreciate that call and that question.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate the call. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to button up our conversation with Ottawa County Clerk Justin Roebuck. You'll always appreciate him giving some of his time for our questions. And we'll put the podcast on our webpage at WHTC.com under Talk of the Town in a few minutes. You can listen or download it at your convenience for free. We are doing also a Zoom call. So we'll put the video, a link to it a little bit later on today in the description of the podcast at WHTC.com. Justin Roebuck, thank you very much for your time and your answers. And if all goes well, let's do this again next month.
That sounds good. I'll be working on my statement for my cliche for what the segment can be called.
All right. Thank you very much. Justin Roebuck on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.